I'm Emily Maguire, and I've been given the absolute honour of launching this wonderful book tonight. When I was 14, I was what you might, if you were being polite, call boy crazy. Of course, nobody at my Western Suburbs public high school was polite, so the terms I was more likely to hear were slut, whore, slapper, scrubber, mole. Or from the teachers and parents, it was some version of trouble. Troubled, troublesome, troublemaker. But I was also a Christian whose social group was largely made up of members of a then new, all singing, all dancing, all moralising evangelical Christian church. So my Saturdays were spent sourcing alcohol and trying to pick up, and my Sundays, whether I managed to dodge church or not, were spent hungover and dripping with religious guilt and existential dread. It wasn't all sex and God. I read and wrote all the time. I held tight to the terribly original dream of running away to Paris to be a poet. I also had a part-time waitressing job in the kind of restaurant where customers were encouraged to throw food scraps on the floor, and the managers got progressively drunker and handsy, more handsy as the night went on. I had parents who loved me, and I knew that, but that seemed completely irrelevant at the time. It wouldn't have occurred to me that they could possibly be any help when it came to the things that I dealt with every day. Now, hearing this, those of you who've already read Kirsten's novel or who know the basic gist will understand why reading it was for me full of shocks of recognition. In so many ways, I felt I was reading not my story exactly, but maybe the story of the girl I might have been if I'd been born 20 years later, when smartphones were there to record everything, and that shiny new local church had become a hugely internationally famous one. So the girl of the title, just a girl, Layla, is a 14-year-old who remembers as if it was 50 years ago being a curious child, but says she no longer asks questions because there's a point where you've heard it all before. She's a girl who, after being sexually assaulted by her boss, says nothing, just walks to the bus stop, but she's wishing she could crawl out like a turtle. She's thinking, where's my shell? It's a girl whose mother thinks the charismatic preacher is the answer to all their problems, not realising that's the same preacher who takes teenage girls to 5-star hotels. Layla is a girl who occasionally sees through the fog of hormones and confusion and fear and feels love and compassion for her mother, who understands that her mother too is lonely and uncertain of the future. She's a girl who occasionally lets her mother have the last bit of cake. And when I put it all like that, I realised that it's not just because of the similarities in my life at 14 and Layla's that makes her resonate with me. It's that she really is a flawed, frustrating, hilarious, vulnerable, complicated and vivid living human being. And that's actually rare. As I'm sure many of you will have noticed, that almost everything written or screened for an adult audience about teenage girls presents them as either sex-mad airheads or sweet and delicate flowers. They're either out-of-control tarts ruining society or innocent angels being ruined by society. Now, as I've said, I have powerful memories of being a teenage girl, and I know neither I nor my friends fit into either of these ridiculously simplistic categories. And I'm also lucky enough now to work with, write about, and be a friend, older sister, auntie, and teacher to all kinds of girls and young women. And not a single one amongst them fits the media stereotypes. And one of the things that's wonderful about this book is that this most maligned of demographics, this most exploited and stereotyped of characters, the teenage girl, is allowed to be complicated. Layla is sexual and childish. She's bratty and kind. She's confused and insightful. She causes some trouble, but by God does she have some trouble thrown at her by the toxic society which the adults around her have created. A big part of that toxic culture is represented in this book by one of those things that makes Layla's life very different to mine at 14, and that's technology. But still, a lot of the crap Layla and just about every girl I know in real life has to put up with predates the internet. I'm talking about the vile misogyny that comes through in all these so-called jokes and lighthearted comments about female bodies. Like when Layla's boyfriend at one point, Davo, says you can never trust anything that bleeds once a month but doesn't die. And his mates honk like donkeys while all the girls in the outer circle shift position slightly as if to combat a stiff breeze. And how familiar that is. The comment, the honking, the shifting. With the week we've just had in terms of the public discourse around women, scenes like this one ring especially true. For all our fine rhetoric about self-esteem and empowerment, ours is not a girl-friendly society, not by a long shot. But happily, Layla, like most teenage girls in the real world, is not just a sponge or witless victim. I don't want to give too much away for those of you who haven't read the book, but suffice to say that she doesn't placidly accept the insults, abuse and exploitation. Which is not to say she's not hurt by any of it, of course she is. But she is, as most teenage girls must be, a warrior. She has resilience, she has power, and if she sometimes misuses it, or messes up, or hurts herself or others in an attempt to make things better, well, who the hell doesn't? And that brings me to the other major thread that grabbed me by the throat, and that's Layla's mother, Margot. Like I said, I remember being Layla, but now in my mid-30s, an auntie, teacher, mentor to girls Layla's age, and a sister and friend to their parents, I found my heart breaking just as much, or more at times, for Margot. Depressed, lost, rejected, God-seeking Margot. Because I know now what I only occasionally suspected back then, and that is that most adults are just as confused, messed up and liable to do awful things as teenagers. It's just that we have this agreed conspiracy of silence around it all. We all agree to pretend that adults know better than teenagers and that we only do things for good, sensible, non-selfish reasons, and that above all we are calm and sane and driven by reason. We do this so as not to scare or lose what little control we have over the kids. So there's Margot doing as we all are, her very best. And the fact that most of the time it's not good enough is heartbreaking. She wants, as we all want, to believe that parents can keep kids safe just by loving them enough. She wants, as we all want, to believe that our vulnerability to tricksters and sleazebags and magical thinking dissolves when we turn 18, or at the very latest, when we bring a child into the world. If only. I'm going to stop talking in a second and hand over to the woman of the hour, but I did just want to make one more very important point. I was immediately drawn into this book, as I said, because I do identify so strongly with the characters. But I reckon even those who weren't teenage sluts or mothers or maid will be gripped. Partly, that's because Just a Girl really is as much about searching for connection as it is about being a teenager. It's just as much about combating loneliness as it is about technology. But mostly it's because Kirsten is a damn fine writer of just amazing insight and empathy. I don't believe there's any character she couldn't get me to empathise with. I don't believe there's any story she couldn't make me care deeply about. So hooray for Kristen Krauth and hooray for Just a Girl.
Thanks, Emily, for that intro. I've followed Emily's career with great enthusiasm since I first read Taming the Beast. Her latest novel, Fishing for Tigers, is one of my favourites from last year. So if you haven't read it, I recommend you go down and buy it on the way out. It's so wonderful seeing you all here tonight. Thanks for coming to help me celebrate the launch of Just a Girl. Publishing a novel is something I've dreamed of since I started writing stories when I was 5 years old. My first short story was about a wonder horse called Snowball, and my second was about the Sydney Harbour Bridge being sad because she was so grey. So she painted herself in rainbow colours. I still write about Sydney, but I've moved to the outskirts now. Most of the book is set in Springwood in the Blue Mountains and Penrith, and on the train in between. This book has been percolating for about 12 years. The central voice emerged when I was working at Real Time Arts Journal around 2000. I was writing a column on hypertext fiction created for the internet, and I started to write my own. I would write a paragraph, choose a word to link, and then riff on that word in another paragraph. This strange, disjointed young voice emerged, and Layla was born. Then I got distracted by fonts and web pages and design, and the project sat for a few years. Later, I was commuting for 4 hours each day between Springwood and King's Cross. I listened to schoolgirls every day on the train and got caught up in their daily dramas. I started thinking about being a teenage girl today. What would it be like to be 14 in the digital age? With mobiles, Facebook, instant messaging, the ability to distribute images of yourself, to have conversations in your bedroom with strangers, to bully someone with a click of a button. What if you had a mum and dad who didn't notice what you were up to? In my early 30s, a friend Rachel said to me, "What you need to do is write, Kirsten. Things will change if you just start writing. Just sit down and do it." She could see that I was stuck. So it's all or nothing with me. I quit my full-time job and enrolled in a research master's in creative writing at Sydney Uni. But in all my years of writing to date, I'd done very little creative writing. I had a few short stories to my name that I had done at uni. But real time had been a great training ground for experimenting with style. So thanks, Keith and Virginia, for that. My master's supervisor, Sue Wolfe, saw the potential. She liked the percolating ideas. She also could see I was stuck. She gently encouraged me to start off small. I wrote paragraphs, fragments, with no end in mind. Layla's voice came back to me, and it was a natural fit. I delighted in it. Each month I churned out 4,000 words and 2 other characters emerged. Margot, Layla's mother, who's moved from ecstatic rave parties to evangelical churches and found there's not much difference. And Tadashi, a Japanese-Australian man who tenderly forms a relationship with his love doll. Fragments pieced together, and it started looking like a manuscript. From a novella came a novel, and Terry Ann White, the publisher at UWA Publishing, and yet another real-time connection, encouraged me along the way and took it on in the end. And now here's my Academy Awards moment. I have many people to thank. To Emily Maguire for her talent and provocations. To Virginia Lloyd, my agent, for seeing the potential. To Terry Ann and the team at UWA Publishing, my editor Linda Martin, Kiri Falls in marketing, and Anna Maley Fagias, who designed the beautiful cover, which really represents the book, I think. To Sue Wolfe and Wendy James, who were so generous in their quotes for the cover. To my good friends Kate and Jill, who are always there in the highs and lows. And my other buddies here tonight too. To Damon for his strength and humour. To my mum for her unwavering support and groundedness. To my dad for showing me it could happen. To my kids, Greta and Finn, for teaching me how to focus when it counts. To Ali, Shawnee, Fee, Rimus, Dee, Michelle, and the rest of the Krauth and Maguire clan for their encouragement at all stages. To Julia and the New South Wales Writers Centre and the writers I work with at Newswrite, who are so inspiring. To Gleebooks for the shindig. And finally to Shan. She always encouraged my creative endeavours and listened to them seriously. She was my aunt, godmother and confidant, and I miss her every day, and the book is dedicated to her. Feels very surreal. It's like I'm having one of those dreams where I'm walking down a long flight of stairs, passing all these people I've known in the past from various stages in my life. And when I get to the bottom, the door opens to an exam room, and I sit down, and then I realise I have no idea what the exam is for, and I haven't studied. And then I look down at myself, and I realise I'm completely naked, and then I wake up. I have a lot of dreams like that. Which is a neat segue into the reading I'm going to do tonight from Just a Girl, and this is Layla. Mum's dropped me off early at Springwood, so I can get the express train. I'm tired of always running to catch the bus at the other end, and I want to go over my assignment, practice it in my head. I've got to give my talk today on Long Island Lolita. I've done a lot of work on it, but I'm not sure how it's going to go down with Mrs. Cockburn. She says Coburn, as if you won't notice the missing CK. I sit on the concrete and go over my notes, hum the words to myself down the page. Last night I read it to Rusty. He wagged his tail at the end of each paragraph. We've got history in the demountables. No aircon. I've got to stand up in class. I'm worried I'm going to get a sweat stain. I packed on the deodorant, then let it air dry and finished off, under my arms with the hairdryer. Maybe I won't take off my jumper, but the classroom is so hot. It stinks like someone's pissed around the walls. Sometimes I feel like doing it myself, because it's so far to get to the girls' toilets. It'd be easier just to do the big squat. I get really nervous before these talks. I find it hard to deal with the reality. My mind is swamped and I can't think what to say. I hope there are no questions, but Mrs. Cockburn always makes the class ask questions. And if they don't, she launches in, usually with something totally off topic, trying to throw you completely. I once saw a guy in class, Bilal. He went into complete meltdown, literally. He started to pour with sweat. His English wasn't so great. Sheets of rain were coming out from under his hair, down his neck, torrents down his face. We all tried not to look at him, but it was a slow car wreck because it happened at the beginning of his talk. And there was no going back then. He had to keep going, pretending it wasn't happening, trying to quietly stem the flow with quick moves of the back of his hand. It probably would have been better if he just got a tissue out and started to mop up. I can't remember a single thing he said. We all hoped it would end soon, or that he would die and put us out of our misery. At least I won't be that bad. Maybe I'll just try to think of him. It'll make me feel better. Some people can just get up and public speak. They don't even need notes. They just treat it like they're talking to a friend. Dad's like that. I saw him once cooking in front of a hall full of people. He was just relaxed, even making jokes. His hands didn't shake like mine do. I wish now I'd asked him for some tips. Mum says, just imagine everyone in their underwear. Fuck a doodle, how original is that? But I tried it before and it doesn't work. It just makes me curious and stare at everyone for too long. What would they all be wearing? I mean, what if Mrs. Cockburn wears a thong? I think I would die on the spot. I wish I had my talk first period and then I could get it over with, but it's last period, so I've got to try not to sweat all day. The train pulls in and I run. The front carriage is usually the quietest. I've got a double seat to myself. There are no other school kids, except the posh uniforms who go to grammar in town. But there's a weird smell in the air, like a rubbish bin that hasn't been emptied, full of rotting rock melon. I peer over the back of my chair. There's an old guy sleeping behind me. He's sprawled out along both seats. His matted hair covers his face like a cat sitting backwards on his head. I think about moving, whether it's worth losing my double seat. He must have got the train back from Lithgow. Homeless people often sleep on the late train, stay at Lithgow station, then catch an early train in the morning. I guess it's safer than a night on the street. And you can probably get some sleep, because these green seats are quite comfy. Unlike the bloody Tangara. So hard your ass has gone to sleep on its own by Penrith, but not the rest of you. I decide to put up with the smell. I've just started rehearsing Long Island Lolita when I see it. Fuck a doodle, not again. This is something I just can't deal with right now. The flickering gets closer. Maybe if I don't look, it'll go away. The smelly guy swats it with his newspaper. He starts muttering to a guy across the aisle. He's looking out the window, pretending he can't hear. He turns to me and his face lights up. If I could just grab the bugger. He's standing on the seat now, trying to catch the moth with his hoodie. They're good tucker, lots of fat. The Aborigines used to have big feasts where they'd roast them in the fire, eat them whole. Come here, you little bugger. The moth lands on the chair of his seat before stumbling onto the window ledge. He swoops on it. See how they're drawn to the light? They think it's the sun coming up, and so they're trying to find some place to hide. You can't eat them now, though. Got arsenic in them. The moth is moving towards me, capturing the corner of my eye, bouncing against the light. Hopefully someone else will get rid of it. A woman screams and jabs at it with her umbrella. Now it's stuck up against the rounded windows, trying to crawl up in a dance of death. It keeps falling towards me. I hold my school folder up to cover my head, ready to swat the moth away. It's so soft and ugly. The big brown wings never stop. It happens every year. Sometimes the carriage is full of them. You'll open a door and they'll rush at you from a corner, like a squadron of jet fighters in formation. I'm scared it's going to touch me. It rains bits of stuff from its own body as it launches into the glass. Brown wing and dirt shudder onto my uniform. I'm nearly completely horizontal in my seat now. I will not let it near me. Oh, fuck a doodle, just give up and die, will you? It's on the seat behind me now. It has fairy wings like a vampire bat. I try not to look at it. But on the wings are these light circles, little eyes that just sit there staring at me. Then it's up again, ramming against the window, desperately getting into the groove and clambering upwards. I'm just stuck here unable to move. I've given up on not looking ridiculous. How could anyone eat them? It would be like putting a cat's tail in your mouth. All fuzzy or crunchy if cooked. Its wings are as big as my hand. I'm thinking I might have to get off at the next station, even though it's not Penrith. It's like it's attracted to me, and it still keeps staggering and falling up and down the window, the way it beats against the light, the way it opens its wings like that, how it stumbles about as if it's blind. I want to grab it and crush it. Quick, put it out of its misery. But that would involve touching, feeling the soft wings of death. And then from the corner, a man steps up. He calmly cups the creature in his hand. He returns to his seat and sits very still. I sit up and pretend to read, but I secretly watch his face. It's the man I like to look at. He zones out into the early morning light like he's meditating. He has a big battered suitcase that he rests one hand on, holds the bogong moth delicately on his knee as if calming it down. The whole way he just sits there with it, letting it quietly flutter. When we get to Penrith, he follows me down the train aisle. I open the door and he gently lets the moth fly out through his fingers. I say thank you and he smiles. A small smile that doesn't reveal his teeth. I feel like I should give him an offering of some kind. The only thing I can think of is my name. Hi, I'm Layla, I say. He stands back as I step outside the carriage. I turn to see his response, but he's gone. Back to reach his little corner. The moth flutters helplessly and does a big loop. Straight back into the carriage as the doors shut and the train pulls out and away from me.
Yeah,